Jim, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, let me say what a great pleasure and even more what a great honor it is to share the podium with all of this distinguished group and also the amazing talk we just heard from Craig Ventnor. The answer, in short, to your question, can systems engineering at a global scale make sustainability possible? The answer is it's the only way to do it. But we're not close to doing it yet. We live in an age of technological breakthroughs that are profound and political confusion that is also profound, and almost breakdown of political leadership and capacity in government. The realities of unsustainability have outstripped politics. Our governments neither have the scale, the financing, the means, the knowledge, nor often the interest in facing up to these problems. So we have a profound systems challenge. We also have a juggernaut of a global economy that operates with inertia. And inertia doesn't mean sluggishness. Inertia means, in this case, tremendous growth of about 4% per year on the global scale, meaning a doubling time of the world economy of less than a generation, meaning that the pressures on the Earth's natural resources are proceeding so rapidly that they are beyond normal political and infrastructure time horizons. So we have a challenge that is, in my view, unique, unprecedented in scale, unprecedented in spatial scale, population scale, political scale, and temporal scale in the timing that needs to be done. We often hear about the miracles of science and technology and what they can mean in the genome or synthetic biology, and all of that's true, but it will not reach a world population in solutions if we are not a lot more clever about some fairly basic problems that we confront. So first, I use the phrase sustainable development rather than sustainability to emphasize that we're talking about environmental sustainability alongside economic development. Economic development is surely the most powerful political imperative on the planet because 6/7 of humanity live in developing countries that want to be like developed countries. And to give you the scale, developing countries have an average income of about $4,000 per capita, developed countries of about $40,000 per capita, average global income about $10,000 per capita, 7.2 billion people, about a $70 trillion world economy. And if the developing countries were to, quote, catch up with the developed countries, and they have the means to do so because it's basically through education, infrastructure, and technology that they will do so, that would mean mechanically a rise of income fourfold globally to, say, 280 trillion. Add in population momentum, which will carry the planet perhaps another 40% population increase before stabilization. We're talking about a 5- or 6-fold increase of throughput. Well, our current technologies cannot begin to do that because we will reach crucial planetary boundaries, ecological and resource boundaries, well before that happens. One answer to that is the growth won't occur. Countries will remain trapped in a highly unequal world, zero-sum struggle, fight for natural resources, fight over water, environmental refugees. If you think that's science fiction, that's our daily newspapers, ladies and gentlemen. And it will get worse. Or we find a way to engineer our way around some of these bottlenecks, and we know that that potential exists. The world could be run on renewable energy alone. The world, in principle, could be run on a pretty small square of the insulation of the Sahara Desert alone. That's not news. That's just basic physics. And that means, in principle, putting aside the 1,000 absolutely real practical problems, There are solutions, but we're very, very far from mobilizing them in the time horizon that's required. So I use the phrase sustainable development as the advisor to the Secretary General. This means three things in the formal jargon. It means economic development, including and especially the end of poverty. It means social inclusion for more equal societies, and it means environmental sustainability. We're nowhere near close, ladies and gentlemen, to achieving this. There remain about 1 billion people whose life is a daily struggle for survival. A mosquito bite, a heat wave, a temporary drought kills millions every year when you add them up. We have high and rising inequality and I would say lawlessness in our societies. We've invented a system of systematic lawlessness. They're called tax havens, among other things. Trillions of dollars are in the British Virgin Islands, the British Cayman Islands, British Bermuda. Thank you. You have created quite a system. It's inventive. It's incredibly destructive. It is under the political choice of this country and of others, because we have our own that we've created, to get this lawlessness under control. We have massive degradation of the climate in all parts of the world, and we still have rapid growth of population. If you believe that population is under control, look at the situation in sub-Saharan Africa. The 2010 estimate is 856 million people. The medium fertility forecast of the UN Population Division is 3.3 billion in sub-Saharan Africa by 2100. The third most populous country in the world in the 2010 UN revisions, as of 2100, would be Nigeria, 750 million people. My advice is don't try it. To go from 150 million to 750 million in the age of climate change would be nothing but disaster. But that's the trajectory that we're on right now. So we are not on a sustainable development trajectory. That's New York City, the pride of global capitalism. With the Hurricane Sandy in early November, in the midst of a presidential campaign where climate change wasn't mentioned even once, because our political system is so corrupted that we don't even talk about the most important things in a year of the hottest instrument year in American history, the worst drought in decades, a superstorm, but the politicians are terrified of the powerful interests. And so they don't even discuss these issues. But the other superpower, or the rising superpower, Beijing, it had the same floods. It has the same extreme events. This is worldwide now. Of course, while New York was flooded by Superstorm Sandy, we had a killer drought that covered 60% of American counties this past year and destroyed about 20% of the grain crop in the heartland of America, which is also the heartland of world grain production. And you can see from the summer this extraordinary drought. The dark red is exceptional, the lighter red is extreme, and the beige is severe. You can see that this was absolutely an extraordinary occurrence. The Farm Bureau, on the record, says there's no such thing as human-induced climate change. So it's also a very weird country, driven by many powerful vested interests and massive political confusion. And massive ideological confusion as well. But it's not just the U.S. I spend most of my time in places like this. The poorest places in the world, they're already suffering extreme events that claim massive lives and that are at the core a major part of the violence and instability in places like Mali. I don't care how many drones we throw at the problem. We will not stabilize Mali, Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, or any place else when people are hungry. And people are increasingly hungry in these places. And our generals and our politicians don't get it. They just want to knock off the next al-Qaeda lieutenant as if this is going to solve anything. If we don't get to the root of the problem, we will not achieve national security anywhere. This is a map, I don't have time to explain it, of James Hansen, the chief scientist of the U.S. government on climate change, looking at the 3 standard deviation events in the world, measuring 3 standard deviations on a baseline of 1950 to 1980, and then projecting by the same metric the number of extreme events in recent years. The maps at the bottom are for 2009, 10, 11. You see the world is covered by 3 standard deviation events, which are supposed to happen roughly 2 times out of 1,000, but are now happening 100 times out of 1,000 if you keep the 3 standard deviation metric of a baseline from 50 to 80. We're in the age of the Anthropocene. We're already in the age of instability. And the world knows it. Only the politicians deny it. You can tell I'm not too keen on our politics these days. I work in a lot of conflict-ridden countries. The drylands are our canary in the mine shaft in the world. The drylands are in drought. The drylands are suffering from instability because they already have the highest coefficient of precipitation in the world, and they are bursting out in conflict in a zone of about 11,000 miles from Senegal to Afghanistan. And this, I tried at the White House, I've tried everywhere. They cannot hear this basic message because it would force them to think. And there's no time to think. They always have an election coming up. But we are not solving these problems. This is what unsustainability means. The red triangles are the conflict zones. The colored areas are the drylands. We have choices. The world population is on track to reach more than 10 billion people by the end of this century on the medium forecast. With unchanged fertility rates, by the way, it would reach 16 billion. That's not going to happen. With a low fertility trajectory, which is in reach if we would help girls to stay in high school, basically, in poor countries, we could stabilize at about 8 billion and have the population come down to about 6 billion. This is a matter of girls' and women's empowerment. Of course, family planning, child survival, and especially secondary education for girls. But we don't make the choice yet. And it became politically taboo to talk about population in the world, especially for a lot of reasons. I don't have time to dwell on it. But we have to talk about population because nobody's aspirations for sustainability or sustainable development can be achieved if Africa remains on a trajectory of 3.3 billion people by the end of the century. Impossible. Asia, of course, will dominate in many of the crucial areas of resource use. It's China's rise that is the biggest mover of all of the major challenges right now. That's not to begrudge China its rise at all. In fact, on per capita terms, China is still roughly a half to a fourth of the U.S. and the high-income world. It is just to say China is big, growing rapidly, voracious in its resource demands, and with profound effects on all global markets, on CO2 emissions, and indirectly on deforestation, species extinction, and many, many other phenomena. That's what happens when a giant arises and grows at a rate of roughly 10% per year for 5 doublings over a 32-year period. And so we've had a phenomenal period of unprecedentedly rapid economic growth. That's good news. I'm a development economist. I love to see that. But we have planetary boundaries that are not being respected. As of 2050, about 80% of the working age population will be in Asia and Africa. So we should think about what this means geopolitically and how to organize around these issues. It's a major question. Now, very, very briefly, the world has tried 2 basic approaches to this, neither one totally satisfactory, but I want to propose something quickly in the end. In 1992, we went the route of international law. adopting 3 major treaties, one on climate change, one on biodiversity, and one on desertification. 20 years later, we met at Rio Plus 20 on the anniversary of the Rio Earth Summit. Nature magazine was correct to give these 3 treaties 3 Fs. Failures, massive failures. They have not shifted the needle at all. And for a lot of denial and geopolitical reasons, China says, we won't do anything till the U.S. does it. The U.S. is absolutely in the worst psychological hang-up about China, as well as in the grips of special interests. So there's paralysis in the U.S., and China says, if you're paralyzed, we're much poorer. Why should we do anything? And the rest of the world continues on. Europe is the only region of the world trying a little bit, even though it chose a very flawed model. This trading system was the wrong way to go on energy. You don't solve a deep structural systems issue by spot market trading of permits. It's absurd. It's just wrong idea. It worked if you trying to clean particulates out of a flue stack or scrub sulfur oxides. But the politicians who are not very knowledgeable in general and always looking for the easy way out took a long-term deep problem of energy transformation and said this is like cleaning smokestacks in coal-fired power plants of sulfur oxides, and took a flawed model because then they didn't have to use the word tax to put this whole mess in perspective. And so Europe is the only region that's trying to do something, but it chose a bad model. The rest of the world isn't even trying right now. And so the treaties failed. I've been involved in a different kind of exercise, which I believe in more, actually, or at least as a complementary part, and that is global social mobilization. As we call them, the Millennium Development Goals. These have been aspirational but not legally binding goals on fighting poverty, hunger, and disease. They've made a lot of difference, though by no means all that they could or should have done. They're not legally binding. We had no lawyers around asking what is binding, what's monitorable, and so forth, which has been what the climate discussions have been about for 20 years. Almost irrelevant questions, by the way, because the climate negotiators don't have a clue as to what's in their own country's real interests. I call it a poker game of 192 players, all of them holding blank cards, because they have no idea what their real energy systems could be like. They don't know what systems transformation is. They don't know whether they could run their power grids on offshore wind or on solar or on carbon capture and sequestration. What are they negotiating about? Only that someone else do something other than them. That's the only game they play. It's absolutely mind-bogglingly wrong-headed. The MDGs had none of that. They said, here are aspirations, let's get organized to do something. And I'd say they got halfway or even more in some areas. We need a global social movement combined with the systems engineering to show what can and should be done. The politicians will be the last to move. They are the followers. You, as engineers, are leaders, and you have to show what's possible in deep transformation, not in gimmicks, but to actually do the carbon arithmetic, or the sustainable agriculture, or the other areas. Politicians will not do arithmetic, ladies and gentlemen. They will not. So expertise has to do it first. I believe, as the Rio Plus 20 Summit adopted, we need to move to Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, so that we should move from MDGs to SDGs in the UN jargon. What would these entail, for example? They would entail a commitment, which is achievable, by the way, of ending extreme poverty, because extreme poverty meaning not having even the basics to stay alive is obviously an anachronism in the 21st century. There's no reason for it. Targeted investments can end it. Second, it's possible that all poor countries could be at least middle income by 2030, because economic growth really works. Third, our societies could be a lot more socially inclusive, especially by ensuring that every child and every girl gets a decent, at least secondary education. This is the most powerful thing one can do within a generation. Fourth, we have to make a deep transformation to a low-carbon economy, to new, more complex, information-based agriculture, and to more resilient cities. And we need new norms for public and corporate governance. So that's my list of what the Sustainable Development Goals should entail. Let me just mention some of the technologies that are absolutely crucial for this. I would put the energy system as highest on the list. We cannot go on with the fossil fuel-based world economy, period. We probably don't even have the fossil fuel base, because I think what we're finding is that many of the estimates, certainly the hype around hydrofracking, will not pan out. Even the vast presumed coal deposits are probably significantly exhaustible on the scale of the world economy at this point. So even from a resource-based point of view, we're in an odd situation of rising scarcity, rising real prices of fossil fuel, but enough fossil fuel to wreck the planet. So we're probably in the worst of both worlds. On the other hand, the breakthroughs in renewable energy are remarkable. We have photovoltaics now down to 70 cents a watt from about $50 a watt 40 years ago. This opens up actually grid competitive renewable energy in major parts of the world, but it needs systems engineering. There need to be transmission lines. There need to be smart grids to carry this. There need to be better ways to manage intermittent energy sources. So solar and wind really are vast. It's nice that wind is on the coasts, and that's where the world's major cities are also. So that's a pretty convenient fact. And recent studies of very detailed diurnal energy use on the east coast of the United States show fairly convincingly that the offshore wind could power essentially all of the northeast economy of the United States from Virginia to Maine. That's a huge fact, but we don't have one wind turbine out there yet, not a single one. We do have plenty of lawsuits over wind turbines, but we don't have a single wind turbine. We don't have any political leadership to actually break through these issues. So renewable energy, carbon capture and sequestration, I was asking just now, maybe we'll hear a bit more about it. Either it works or it doesn't work. There are major debates about this. If it does work, we can use fossil fuels safely. If it doesn't work, we can't. The amount of engineering on this has been far too small. There are huge open geological questions. Can you really store CO2 safely on a scale that makes a difference? Is this economically feasible? Should we forget it, as some people say, or is it real? And I see the heads nodding one way or another. I don't know. I'm just a lowly economist. And I noticed that when Craig Ventnor talked about his interdisciplinary team, he didn't mention economics on it. All the power to him. But the fact of the matter is we have to decide. We have to know better, I should say. Is that off the table or on the table? Because when I sit at the UN meetings, which I do, it's on the table, on paper. It's not in reality. It would be good to have a little bit more clarity of this point, I have to say, and I put a little bit in quotation marks. Of course, much smarter grids. Every scenario shows that we have to electrify transportation for the vast bulk of our transport. Almost any systems thinking says we need to go to electric vehicles on a large scale. So we need the generational change and innovation in that area. Agriculture, even more tricky, by the way, because there are 1,000 agricultural systems. There are only a few transport systems, but agriculture is local. It's local to climate, it's local to culture, it's local to soils, it's local to topography, it's local to ecology in many other ways. Highly complex, highly charged, massively confused. We have a great expert here, Kalestis Juma, who I'm sure will say quite a bit about that. Cities I've mentioned, population I've mentioned. I think at a fundamental level, all of this is harnessing digital knowledge, which is our greatest advance. We are in the midst of a completely profound historical, technological revolution that I believe is as large as the steam revolution, as large as the electricity revolution, the knowledge revolution of computerization and Moore's law, and big data and transformations of biology, synthetic biology, engineering, nanotechnology, and all that this makes possible gives us the way forward to reconcile the aspirations of development and the imperative of environmental sustainability. Thank you very much.